Perfect. Jayne, so I'll hand it over to you.
I was just sausage ringing, sorry. Hi, nice to see so many faces, and those that can't join us with the video on, please feel free to ask any questions or join in however you feel appropriate. So I'm Jayne, I'm a divorce and financial coach. So now I'm working with people looking at their situations, whether they're married or not, going through split ups and separations, trying to help people that are making the decision, should I stay or should I go, analysing what's good about the relationship and actually should they be walking away. I'll come on to my story about why, where I am, but I'll tell you what I'm doing now first of all. So the financial side, I hope not many of you have been through the divorce, but when you start going through a divorce, the paperwork is pretty much, as an ex-IFA, I will even describe it as a horrific, God knows how many trees, how much information you have to provide. And I'm financially astute. So for people that are not financially astute, it is probably, it is pretty mind-blowing. It's a roller coaster. You look at the paperwork and think, I just don't even know where to start with this. So I've tweaked the divorce coaching to include divorce financial coaching as well, whereby I'll be working with people to go through their what's called a Form E, which is the initial disclosure document about your affairs, helping people complete that. So I've even had friends where their husbands have done everything previously for them. They didn't realise that you had to pay council tax. So, sort of helping women, or maybe men as well, understand their finances in a way that you can then give that to the solicitors to work with. You have varying qualities of solicitors. Obviously, you have some that my one's very good. You went through line by line with me, made sure everything was right. I've had friends that have gone through divorces where the solicitors literally slung this form at her and said, get on with it. And then it's submitted with no questions, and everything in between, obviously. And solicitors are very expensive. So you're looking at probably £300 an hour to complete this form. And it is a chunky old form. And if you've got complicated assets or businesses, and not just PAYE with a house, it does become very complicated and very costly very quickly. So I'm working with people to look at their affairs in order to prepare for divorce, do the divorce financials, and then look at the other side. Once you then place this form, you then have an analysis, questions and answers. So really, again, looking at whether A plus B equals C. So it's sort of a two-stage coaching, really. You've got the actual divorce, whether healing from a relationship breakdown, and principles that you can use with any role of life, whether it's working with your boss or your grads in your team, working with home help, your parents, looking at how you resolve conflict and how you actually move on, moving people into the new world, they're what I call their chapter 2. So meeting new people, their new relationships, and how they actually learn from their marriage to make sure they don't go down that path again with somebody new, because it's very easy to just use your habits and just, oh, that's my comfort zone, this is the sort of person I want to meet and be with. Just really how you fine tune that and restart your life, how you help the children recover from divorce. So it's sort of whether it's not just looking at what's happened, it's how we move forward into our new lives, making your life, so I call it the chapter 2, your life, your way. So just how have I got here, really? When I left university, I went on a graduate training scheme with MPI. I don't know if any of you remember the Little Red Squirrel Company, based out in Tunbridge Wells. Got bought by AMP literally just as I joined, who are an Australian insurer. And I did a year-long graduate training scheme with them, which was spent in hotels on intense training courses, looking at sales skills and how you talk to people, learning about financial services. We had to take the FPC, as it was then, within the, I think it was first 6 months. So to go from a graduate with no idea about a pension to be able to pass the FPC in that time was pretty intense. I knew within the first week of being at MPI that actually I wanted to go to become a financial advisor, but I felt at 21 it was a bit, I had to take steps to go through to train as an IFA. So I worked at MPI for 2.5, 3 years, and then joined Scottish Equitable in Brighton, and then joined an IFA practice from there when I was about 25, but knew ultimately I wanted to have my own business. I'd always set my goal that at 40 I wanted to have my own company. And I suppose as life goes, I set up my own company at 30, which was called Squirrel Financial, and I sold Squirrel just coming up for 2 years ago, to a well-known national IFA. So that was quite a big achievement, really. But I suppose talk about where I've been and how this has all happened. It was only I joined MPI in 1999, so it's not really that long ago. But the world there, even then, was so heavily skewed to the men in the world. I was when I was on my second placement at MPI, I was the only woman in the whole of the Southeast as a broker consultant. They had a London office, but the actual Southeast, I was the only woman. And the men in the office would actually stand back and expect me to make coffee for them in the conferences. I used to go to events where we'd have fund managers come down and talk to us as when I actually was an IFA. And they're almost like, what are you doing here? This isn't open to the admin. I was like, well, I'm an IFA. And they'd almost be stood in a circle talking, and they'd almost, the fund managers almost come and stand in front of you to cut you out of the circle, because obviously your opinion and your knowledge wasn't as good as the men in the room. We talked earlier, Katie, didn't we, about some of the stuff that's happened as a broker consultant in those days, and how you're treated, which is kind of why I really set up my business early, that I got fed up of being treated like a piece of dirt that was expected to wait on everybody else. Even in my late 30s, I'd be at conferences with other IFAs and they'd all stand back and expect you to make them tea or coffee. I didn't. I just make my own drink and walk away. But I think that's a challenge that we have in the industry, and how everybody deals with it throughout the role. So yeah, going out on my own seemed to be a way to avoid dealing with some of those horrible bosses that are possibly still around. Set up Squirrel, sold the business in part because my now ex-husband worked for me, and we were made a very good offer. He had a fantastic job with the buyer. All the staff were cheapied over. And at the time, I didn't really want to advise again, so I'm probably guilty of not reading my contract completely thoroughly, and I knew I couldn't advise for another 3 years. But as part of my divorce, I was being pushed to find a paid position rather than actually build up another self-employed, go my own way. So in part so that I could get a mortgage, I guess. And then it's come out that in the contract, I'm not allowed to work in financial services for 3 years. So when I sold the business, I retrained as a food intolerance tester, as I'm borderline celiac and my children are both dairy free. So I was looking at how I could help other people identify problems, because everyone thinks, oh, I've got this and I've got that. And actually all the problems I had, my doctor was trying to put me on, I was about 36 at this age. She was saying, oh, you're going through the menopause, have this and HRT. I was like, I know that's not the problem. Not once did they ever mention it could be a food intolerance. So anyway, I ended up with a food intolerance tester, and she picked up that I was borderline celiac at this point. And within a month of cutting out gluten, my whole life changed. It was amazing. Then the children picked up that they were dairy intolerant, and within a month of cutting out dairy, they both slept through the night. My eldest was 7 at this age, so she'd not slept through the night at all at age 7, and it's in part down to dairy. So I retrained when I sold the business as a food intolerance tester, launched the business 1st of January, and it was doing quite well. And then we went into lockdown, and it's closer probably than a hairdresser, so obviously that all went to the wall. So during lockdown and homeschooling, I was thinking, what else can I do? Because I can't just rely on this food business. So I retrained as a coach, thinking that kind of overlapped with what I've been doing as a financial advisor. You've always been teaching people, training your staff, going over and over pension jargon and explaining that to clients almost on a daily basis. So it was kind of a natural step to look at coaching. And then as my divorce progressed, my solicitor actually said, from the way that I was presenting my information, that I should look at divorce coaching, which I hadn't even heard of or thought about. And I found a course to go on, and I've completed that and launched my own version of the divorce and financial coaching. So there's a potted history there. So if we start looking at some of the things that I apply with my clients, everybody knows somebody with relationship trouble at the moment, whether it's yourself, whether you're married, whether you're already split up, or whether you're looking at that route. So I thought we'd start off by looking at some conflict and how perhaps you can look at it differently. So everybody has their map of the world. This is your view. How does your view, how does your map look like? What's going on in your life? what does your manager's map of the world look like? They could be highly stressed. They could be having arguments with their husband who's leaving coffee cups around despite both of them being at home. She could be homeschooling little children. She could be superwoman. She could be suffering with burnout. Something happens, you have an upset. Just think about that woman absolutely on her knees. Then you've got your graduates in your team. What does their work look like? They could be sat on their bed on their laptop, having in their little bed sit up in London. They paid a lot of money to be near their office. They want to go out, they want to mix, they need to learn from you. How they want to rule the world, they want to run before they can walk. Then you've got your parents, that they may be having the jab and want to be out partying. And they've got the money, they've got the time, they want to go out. They could be ill, they could be in care homes, they could be pulling on you. But everyone's got their little map of the world. Like my parents, they're both retired. She goes walking with some friends, and she's like, oh, they're just so wound up, and they've got no money worries, and they just want to go and do this and this, and everyone's just like, oh. But that's their map, that's their problem. So how does that all affect your interaction when you have an upset? So let's look at your potential superwoman boss who's completely, we know how that feels. The kids you're trying to do your work, and someone sends an email, and you, rather than rushing in to respond, you need to just sit back, just think, why is that person behaved like that? What can I do differently? Rather than just instantly going back on the email and responding immediately, just don't. Just take a break. Does it need to be responded to? Break. Go and take a walk. We're at home, going to walk around the park or play some music. Just before you just instantly, we're all guilty of instantly responding with the instant world. Just don't. No one needs an instant response. Just think about what that person's going through and why they behaved in that way before you rush in. The second thing to think about conflict is your upbringing and your view, your map of the world. I'm going to use an example of a Greek and an English person. So the Greek, they get married, so they've been brought up in Greece with a very, I won't say high conflict, but because they wouldn't view it as conflict, but very loud. And if they have an argument, they stay in the room until they sort it out. They will actually, they're very, I can't think of the word. Sorry, my brain's gone. Where you're the Italian, very gesticular and very hands-on. Whereas if you have a stoic British person, and I'm using complete and utter stereotypes just so you get the idea. You've got a very quiet British person that's been brought up where the parents, if they ever had an argument, they would go their separate ways, sleep on it, and then come back and deal with it in the morning. These two then get married and they have an argument. And one of the Greek person is used to having this high, let's sort this out, and we don't leave the room until it's sorted. And the British person is actually, oh no, I go to bed and I sleep on it, and I'm not going to talk to you until the morning. Who's right? How do you resolve this? What do you do? How do you find a way to make that work? Does anybody have any ideas on that at all? And I apologise for the generalisation. It was just to give you two extremes to see.
I think you need to meet in the middle. I'm French Moroccan, so I'm very just like speaks the hands, very passionate, etc. My husband is French. My husband is French with German roots, so it's more. We're not going to talk about it. It's going to sort itself out, which can be fitting for both. We are a very old couple. We've been together for 19 years now, gosh. And what we find is to leave it, but come back to it just in a couple of hours and try to have a discussion. And both of us have to meet in the middle, because I don't want to leave things, because I think it's better to resolve issues, and he'd rather not be confrontational. So we try to meet in the middle, and if it goes to, like, if we start to argue, we just say, okay, time up, get out, and we come back. Or we talk about it while walking these days. With the lockdown, we find it easier.
Yeah, that's much better, isn't it? So you think about that in your relationship. How does that apply at work? Again, you've got the same example. You've got this very passionate, let's sort this out, crash, bang, wallop. And then you've got the person that's actually, well, do you know what? I don't want to talk to you now. I need to go away. And then you're putting these people in an office, and they've got to find a way over some matter and find a way to make that work. It's just sort of thinking about how everyone's different and finding a way to make that work. in a non-conflictual way. So the next thing you can do, so we've got to think about people's map to the world, is something called flipping it, which you may have heard of. And I'm going to be calling on some people with some situations just to try putting it into practice if anyone's brave enough. So I'll just give you a situation. My friend has a boyfriend who's not completely reliable, let's say. He has a habit of going into his caveman and not responding. I won't call him a ghoster because I don't think he's a ghoster. I'll just call him unreliable. So they had a date arranged they're in each other's bubble. They had a date arranged for a Saturday night when he was due to come over, let's say 5 o'clock. It was his son's birthday, but he'd split up, so he wasn't due to see the son. They hadn't been great in the morning when he'd left, and he was coming back to her house. She was going to cook him dinner and actually make his son a birthday cake. And he said, "Oh yes, that would be lovely. See you later." Off he goes. 4 o'clock, my friend gets this gut feeling that something's not right. She hasn't heard from him at all. Thinking, I guarantee he's going to do his no-show again. And 6 o'clock comes and she's like, yeah, he's not coming. So she texts him and says, I take it you're not coming tonight then? And he says, no, I've got a headache. She goes, oh, well, I must have missed a text or phone call for you telling me. Good job I hadn't made your son's cake then, and I hadn't actually started dinner yet. And then she said, do you know what, I'm sick of this, I'm done, and ends it. He doesn't even reply, and she doesn't hear from him until Wednesday. And he says, oh, I had a headache, you seem grumpy, so I thought it was best not to come. So her view is that she's been blown out, that he's unreliable, she could have made a birthday cake, and she's feeling really upset, angry, used, any of those sorts of emotions. What's his view? Anybody want to volunteer?
Probably feeling in pain from his headache all the world if he actually has a headache.
Sorry, Kyle,
Sorry, I was just
and any of that.
Yeah, no, I was just muting someone. I think from his perspective, perhaps it's the fear of conflict. I don't know. Maybe he was picking up on the fact that she wasn't particularly impressed, and rather than dealing with it head on and owning up and saying, you know, I probably should have let you know, he's thinking, I'd rather not have an argument, so probably just won't contact her at all. That's personally not the best thing to do, in my opinion. But I can appreciate, as you use your examples, Jayne, I can appreciate that people handle conflict in different ways, and people may be quite fearful of it. Yeah,
totally. And what do you think a third party would say to that if you were telling both sides of the story there?
You could just see it's a recipe for disaster. You'd probably just say, you know, if you sit down and have open lines of communication, you know, I think it's just so natural from an outsider's perspective just to say, come on, you need to, you know, really, really talk this through, and you wouldn't end up being in a conflicted place. But yes, obviously.
And he maybe actually had a headache. So she just didn't put herself in his shoes and wasn't very compassionate. She was passive aggressive rather than asking, I hope you're feeling better.
Yeah, I think he's come back and said, oh yes, I did have a headache. She said, well, why didn't you say, I've got a headache and I'm not coming and I don't feel well? It would have solved the problem, but instead he just...
I think it's from what you said there, Jayne, about identifying how other people respond to conflict is quite interesting. I am slightly hot-headed, and Robin will agree with me that my face says it all. So if there's, you know, a problem there, everyone knows about it. And that's not necessarily to make people feel awkward. That's because I find it so uncomfortable being in a position where I would rather just talk it out with management, with staff, or even in my home life. I would rather get it out in the open air than harbour these feelings. But then I think it's good to flip it, like you said, and kind of think, actually, this person that I'm, you know, having conflict with may need a couple of hours to resonate on that and come back to me.
Yeah. Does anybody have any examples of conflict they've had recently, whether it's a friend or a colleague or a partner that they'd like to share, that we could just flip just to see it from somebody else's viewpoint? You want to offer anything up? I have got a couple to go through if no one offers anything.
I had a friend once that he didn't show up to our housewarming, and he didn't even text. So kind of a similar situation. I was expecting at least, oh, no, sorry, I can't come. And, similar thing, I have a headache. And I was furious. I was so upset. But my husband was the opposite. He said, oh, it doesn't matter. We've got our friends here. It's a nice day. Let's enjoy it. He wasn't bothered at all. And I was absolutely fuming that he didn't text, he didn't. So I think it's also how people react differently to, it's a personality. I'm more like, okay, why didn't he text? What's happening? And it was in my mind all afternoon. Whereas my husband, I told him the minute after he forgot, like he was back, and I was like, well, how can you do that? Like, I wish I could do that.
Yeah, and sometimes just see it from the person that didn't turn up's point of view, something maybe cropped up, or but yeah, oh well, I'm doing this and they won't mind, they've got lots of other people, they've got their friends there, they won't notice that I'm not there. I guess that's the flipping side from that. I've got another example with a friend. They're split up, and the girl is at the age where the mother doesn't like her having chocolate because she's very spotty. She's very tall and slim, but her face is very bad, and she feels that chocolate is particularly bad. And the father, who's estranged, sent a great big huge box of chocolates, nothing else to the daughter. And the mum was just like, oh my God, I can't believe he sent her chocolate. She can't have it. She's got braces. It all sticks in her teeth. It makes her skin bad. And she's all, The daughter's then caught in the middle. She wants a chocolate. Dad's bought her a lovely box of chocolates. Mum's fuming about it. And as far as Dad's concerned, he's bought his daughter a lovely birthday present. So it's also just, again, when you're sort of thinking about how things escalate for absolutely no reason, it's just almost take a step back, flip that situation into your boss's position, or they've got a deadline, need this done, something's not happened, and they go berserk. And it's almost take a step back. Why? Think about that person. Sorry, Sana.
It didn't happen directly to me, but it happened in my team when one of the girls who I didn't get on with her manager. And because they had different levels of expectations, the manager was expecting the work to be done, not taking into account the personal life of the person. And the other one's like, I cannot be bothered working because I have issues at home. It lasted for a while, a few months. I think that one of the advice I would give, because basically the most junior one was, actually both of them, but mainly the most junior, was going around to everybody, and excuse my French, was just literally bitching about her boss all the time, which actually makes the situation even more, because it started with an issue that was just purely based on facts and deliverables, to a more personal thing, because women sometimes can be a bit silly in this stupid way. And just like literally it was like, it started to be literally on the looks of the person and bitching about each other. So both of them at the end of the year looked very, very unprofessional. And it's ruined both reputations, because it just escalated. One had the reputation of being a bully. And when we actually ended up having both of them sitting in the room, and I was actually had to be involved as a mediator, realized that the most junior, who was actually making the most senior one look like a bully, was actually exaggerating / lying. So ruined the reputation of the other one, make her sound like a horrible person, and regardless, whatever would be said afterwards, the reputation is done, and people will always have the doubt of that other person who went crying literally with tears to others. So I think one of the advice I will give is, if things go bad, just have a conversation rather than letting it go worse. And let's try all to be grown up, because this relationship, like, it ruined the whole team, not only these two people.
Yeah, so that, and then think about what she's like at home as well. And she's probably a very difficult person. And there are difficult people that you just can't work with, and perhaps ultimately she might need to leave the team, but she'll probably find that wherever she goes. But again, if both people could flip that situation, think about the other person, and not think about yourself so much, and think what both of them are going through. As you say, have a conversation early on, nip it in the bud and sort it out instead of making it a big problem for the whole of the team. And it sounds like probably the junior girl is probably not good in the team anyway, but
no, it's and she's not junior actually. Her job was junior, but she's 44, 45.
Oh my God.
That's the thing. Her manager was slightly younger than her, a few years, but she wasn't a kid.
Oh.
But yes, that's like, I find it's something that marked me for a while.
Yeah, well, and it affects the whole team as well. Sorry, someone else.
Yeah, Jane, I was just going to say, do you have any advice for or tips for, dealing with conflicts at work, but in the virtual environment?
Yeah, I'm just actually going to come into my top tips for handling conflict. So my first thing will always be, don't rush to respond, whether it's an ex-husband, a partner, a boss, junior member, just take that time out. I always had the rule that if someone texted or emailed me after office hours, even though I could deal with it, I didn't, because I thought if you open, whether it's conflict or not, if you open the door to be 24 hours, clients will call you 24 hours. So you've got to set your boundaries of what's acceptable. Just because they've emailed you at midnight doesn't mean that someone needs a response at midnight. And if you do it, you're giving them permission to do it and set that expectation that that's what you will do. My ex-husband worked for me, and he would take his phone into the bathroom, and if a client phoned and he was in the shower, he would get out the shower, take the call, and then write all that we need to do, and then go back in the shower. So there was holidays that we had where he would go off and he'd miss whole days where he'd just be on the phone to clients, which, okay, it's your own company, is slightly different. But if you open yourself up with no boundaries, then people will continually abuse those boundaries and they will expect more and more and more. Whereas if you say, right, I am doing, this is my child time, or whatever it is you're doing, or I'm doing some CPD or whatever it is, that's your time. Don't let other people come and invade your space and your boundaries. So I would say, first of all, do not rush to respond. Whether it could be a sales inquiry, it could be a complaint, it could be an upset. Just take a step back, sleep on it if you need to, and just have a couple of hours, just think about it, or talk to a third party. Remove the emotion, get some advice about how to deal with it, write it down. Flip. If it's a complaint, flip it. If someone's upset about, I don't know, I can't think of a complaint off the top of my head, but let's say an investment's not performed the way it should do, rather than just go, oh, I need to just actually write it down. How's that client feeling? They've lost money. Why? Is it a short-term thing, or don't worry about it, tomorrow, it'll be back up again? If it's a bigger complaint, then actually yes, there's a process you need to go down and sort it out. But I think also always be the role model. No matter what the problem, be the role model. Always do the right thing, no matter what, especially if you're dealing with a difficult person. So the situation we were just talking about a minute ago, if they're a difficult person, just make sure you do the right thing. You're only responsible for yourself. Be in control of what you do. Think why that person's acting that way and what's their trigger, what's going on in their lives that's making them behave like that. What does their work? Right.
Hi, sorry, just on your point regarding, answering emails at unsociable hours. So in some industries, especially on the banking side, there's a lot of expectation that you are available there and then. And as you grow in your career, it becomes easier a bit to say, oh, I didn't reply, but I replied X time, whatever. But for juniors, what advice do you give them to manage their managers? Because it's difficult, right, at that level.
I was just thinking
that's harder.
Actually, because I just finished my traineeship, should we call it, and I was in the office at sort of like 7 o'clock, which is about 40 minutes from my home, and the boss phoned and said, he was being nasty. Where are you? I said, actually, I'm in the office already. Where are you? And but then, so that's an example of someone absolutely. The expectation was that we were in the office for say 7:30 and we finished late, and you weren't being paid for it. Okay, you've got bonuses, but your core hours were 9 till 5. And I think if you allow, so I'm going to have a notification just come in. If you allow someone to treat you like that, the expectation is you do. With a junior in a role where they're expected to be, I guess that's a conversation, and they're probably, I suppose, you're taking that job knowing that that's the expectation of you. But equally, you've got to have boundaries as well. And those jobs possibly you wouldn't stay very long if you actually said, you know what, I work 9 to 5, and you can phone me at 9 o'clock at night, I'm not going to answer. You probably wouldn't keep your job. So it's a difficult one to call.
Yeah.
But I think even so, you've got to have
Because
boundaries.
that's
On holiday, then you don't answer the phone.
Sure.
Yeah, in that kind of job, that's a bit different to somebody that is on a 9-to-5 job that is contractual hours. Yeah, that's probably a deal with the manager and say, right, I need to do X at this time. I will make it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult in banking
Okay,
where you
great.
are, I would say.
Yeah.
But going on from that, thinking what their world looks like, and also don't retaliate. So if someone's nasty to you, don't be that role model. Don't use the language they're using back to you. You be yourself, keep your integrity. Grey rock them. I don't know if you've heard the phrase grey rock. If someone's a difficult person, there's a term called grey rocking where you're almost saying, oh, look at that cloud over there. It's white and fluffy, and you're almost being a bit patronising in what you're saying, but you're deflecting the conversation back rather than actually have this attack. With some of the difficult people, I use the term narcissistic lightly, but with narcissistic people and difficult people, you have narcissistic parents, bosses, partners, but you have to handle them in a different way. And if you handle them opening up your emotions, they will come at you using your emotions. So one of my friends that's going through a divorce, her ex-husband is a very narcissistic chap, and she responds in emails saying, you are patronising me. And actually by him, and I don't like it, so by telling him how she doesn't like being treated, she's actually telling him, treat me like this because I don't like it. So if you're dealing with difficult people, look up grey rock. It's all about actually almost talking about a grey rock in front of you. Keep the emotion completely out. So if you're dealing with a narcissistic ex, for example, you might say, oh, the children are being collected at 3 o'clock. There's no, hi, how are you? Did you have a nice weekend? Children looking forward to seeing you. So yep, 3 o'clock, whatever. No more detail than you have to. But you can use that with there are a lot of narcissistic bosses in the financial services. I'm generalising, but I've worked with a few. And it's just, if you let them see your emotions, they know what buttons to press and they know how to get a reaction. They want a reaction. So grey rock them, treat them, take the emotion out, tell them what they need to know, and don't let them attack you, because when they know your way in, then that's what they will do, and they know how to prod you.
Seconds of silence work well as well.
Yes, that's the other thing.
I used to have a boss that was really intense, and she was expecting us, as you said, to be in the office at 7, and when you leave at 8 in the evening, say, oh, are you taking your afternoon off? And being very, not even passive aggressive, she was shouty and things like that. And the 10 seconds of silence when she was crossing the line, I think 1 or 2 times I did, I'll let you calm down and then I'll speak to you when you're calmed down, but that actually just made her explode. Yeah. But the 10 seconds of silence is long.
Yes.
For both sides. And it's actually, I find that when things go bad, it actually makes people so uncomfortable. They have to think of what they said.
Feel the silence. People don't like the silence. So when you're talking sales calls or whatever it might be, or confrontation, if you shut up, say something, shut up, someone will say something because they don't like the silence, and they'll say something and usually hang themselves with it as well. So yes, you can use the silence, and it gives you time to not be impulsive and put on your Teflon suit and just bounce it back off again. And
sorry, I have to go have another meeting. We just started. Would you be able to send the main points, because this is very interesting?
Yeah, of course I will.
So much. I'm sorry about it again.
Thanks. Jayne, just quickly, there's something that I think, and this is definitely my hang up. So, when I say my piece, please don't anyone be offended. But often when you're dealing with a situation and being the bigger person can sometimes make me feel weaker because I'm not saying my full piece and I'm, taking the high road. How can I kind of change my mindset to, fully appreciate that actually not biting back and not fighting fire with fire is leaving me in the position of power? Often I feel like I have to walk away with lots of things I didn't say to not spark a, conflict.
I guess it depends whether you want a conflict. If you want to have that, sometimes you need to have that fiery, especially with a partner, you might need that fiery interchange to clear the air and then make up and sort it out. But then also when you get like that, you say things you regret and you don't mean. So I think it depends who you're dealing with. If you are dealing with a narcissistic type person, you are better to not react at all and take the high ride and be that role model. And you know in yourself, you've held your head up high. I think if it was a boss, and depends if you know you're right, you might have to express yourself differently. But again, walking away and having a couple of minutes just to reflect rather than just go, because that then makes them go, no matter what you say, you won't be right, because everyone's emotions are up on. I think it's just taking that time out to just, before I'm guilty of automatically responding, and you want to go, actually sometimes walking away can be more powerful as well, and it gives you time to think what you actually want to say, and writing it down I find is really useful as well. Just sort of think what's been said, what you want to achieve, and just write it down. And I would say as well.
And what do you think about getting a second opinion? So, for example, in a work situation, if you've had some conflict with a boss, would you seek advice from a colleague who, say if it was, you're quite clouded with anger and you're still, the situation's still quite raw, talking to a colleague, is that something that you'd advise to potentially,
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in talking about problems and problem shared and that sort of thing. And sometimes when you say it out loud to yourself, you think, oh my God, am I really getting upset about someone nicking my chocolate out of the fridge, for example? I'm sorry, I couldn't think about another example. But when you actually say a problem out loud, or it might be about a partner, you're thinking, do you know what? It's not actually that big a deal, but actually it feels it because you're all caught up in the emotion of it. If it is a big deal, like you've been overlooked for a pay rise or a promotion, then yeah, talk to someone and or go back to the person and say, can you tell me why I was overlooked or why I didn't get the pay rise? What can I do differently? I think it's just about presenting yourself differently, and again being that role model of behaviour and integrity, and to know that you've always done the right thing as well, rather than look back on a situation and say, do you know what, I really lost my shit over that, and I look like a complete and utter idiot. And then you've got to pick up the pieces of looking like an idiot or crying in front of the boss. That's not good either. And then you've got to go back into the office the next day and face them. Or okay, not in the office at the moment, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I've got a few points just to summarise on, unless anyone has any questions that they want to jump in on. So just looking at different ways to avoid conflict, and hopefully I've given you some ideas on what you can do. There's loads more we do as coaches that take you through in much more detail. You need to reduce your pain and how conflict affects you. Get clarity in relationships. People are questioning lockdown affecting relationships. Should I stay or should I go? Get clarity on that before you make a life-changing decision, because it's expensive, but also you might not get that person back, and it might be a rash decision, whereas actually you would take a few months to actually put some effort in and think about the good points in your relationship, go out for a walk and hold hands. You might reconnect and realise, you know what, we've got our differences, but we need to find a way to work through it. You can coaches answer questions you didn't know you had, coming down to that, should I stay or should I go? When you even think about that situation, you've got to then look, you don't know what the impacts are. What's the financial impacts? What about the children? You don't even know that you have these questions until you start unpicking it. I guess the coaching answers sortive. And myself, I provide a unique service helping you get to your chapter 2, both financially and emotionally. Everyone knows someone struggling with their relationships, whether it's divorce, separation, grief, even the lost one. And it's just taking people to a new place to find their new you and how to create their new life.
Thank you. Does anyone have any final thoughts or comments? I know it can be a difficult subject to chat about whilst we're recording and in this capacity, so I do appreciate it. But Jayne is actually one of our members as well. All of her details are on the website. She's on our WhatsApp group and LinkedIn group as well. So if you want to take things offline and talk to her about how she can support you, then please do get in touch. And over the next couple of weeks as well, we're going to be circulating some of her blogs, which have got some really interesting tips on. So please feel welcome to take advantage of those as well. Max, did you want to say something, or are you just turning your camera on? No problem, that's fine. So yeah, just a quick update about the next couple of weeks. So as I mentioned at the beginning, tomorrow we've got our session with Alessandra. On Tuesday, we've got a session with another coach from the States. That's going to be a really interesting session. And then next Wednesday on our coffee break, we are actually joined by Jayne Wildish from the Diversity Project. So she's one of the co-founders. Mark has been working very, very closely with her. So really interesting and topical session. Obviously, all the details are on the website. It's the same Zoom link if you just want to pop it in your diaries now. But in the meantime, please get in touch if there's anything else we can do. And obviously, Jayne would love for you to get in touch as well.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much. We finished a bit early, so if you wanted to stay on for a chat, please do. But appreciate you coming. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.